Two hunters vanished from the Appalachian Mountains. One returned. Rangers can't believe what happened. In May of 2016, in a pocket of West Virginia's Appalachian Mountains too remote for a cell signal, two brothers-in-law drove out before first light to call in a gobbler on the last weekend of spring turkey season. One of them walked out 9 hours later, mid-sentence, repeating the same 4 words on a loop, like his mind had gotten stuck skipping the same groove. The other man was never found. Not his rifle, not his boots, not the one thing he never hunted without. This is the account of the ranger who pulled him out of that loop. And in the survivor's own words, what happened in the 4 hours nobody can explain. "What the hell is that?" Obadiah said it out loud, to an empty gravel lot, thumb already rewinding the trail cam footage because the first watch had to be wrong. Frosting was still dried into his uniform cuff from icing a cake at 5 that morning. 11 years on this job, his daughter turning 7 at 2 o'clock, and none of it had taught him how to walk away from a camera doing something it shouldn't. He watched the clip again. The wrongness wasn't in the gobbler stepping through the frame. It was in the numbers burning in the corner. And he wouldn't clock that for another 10 minutes. The timestamp was counting down, not glitching. Counting down second by second, like the footage was walking itself backward through the night. A tom folded tail first into the brush instead of stepping out of it. Bad card, he told himself, already turning for the truck. He radioed it in as an equipment note. That's when dispatch came back with something that snagged harder than the footage. A truck still sitting at this same trailhead from yesterday's dawn hunt, no checkout logged, the overdue window closed 2 hours ago. He didn't know it yet, but he was about to walk the exact 4 miles that clip was filmed on. 15 minutes, he told himself. He could still make the party. The fog at the tree line had no dew point to explain it. The cold was wrong for 6 a.m. in mid-May. An hour past sunrise, the woods still hadn't opened up. No warbler chorus, no wood thrush, just the wet drag of his own boots against the trail. And that's the kind of detail that means nothing on its own. It's only later, once you know how the morning ends, that it starts to matter. Then a gobbler call answered him from off to his left. He hadn't called. He wasn't carrying a box call. It answered again, closer, from a direction that didn't track with anything alive covering that kind of ground that fast. He picked up his pace. Sound does strange things in a hollow this deep, he told himself. Something started matching his footsteps a half beat behind his own, stopping when he stopped, and close behind his shoulder, low enough to be a breath, a voice used the private nickname only his dead partner had ever called him. He spun around. Nothing there. 200 yards on, he found Harlan sitting dead center on the trail, filthy, mid-sentence, repeating the same 4 words on a loop like a skipping needle. Obadiah shouted his name 3 times. On the third, Harlan's eyes snapped into focus, and the first words out of his mouth weren't help. They were, "Is Cole with you?" Harlan's account started the same way it had for 6 years running. He and Cole split before first light to work 2 gobbling toms off separate ridges. It was routine, worn smooth by repetition, the kind of plan they didn't even have to talk through anymore. Cole took the east ridge. Harlan took the west. They'd meet back at the truck by 9. 20 minutes in, Harlan had his bird closing the gap, call by call, the tom hanging up just out of range the way they always did before they committed. Then Cole's voice cut in, answering a question Harlan had only asked in his own head. He hadn't said it out loud. He was sure of that later, sure enough to say it to a hospital chaplain weeks after the fact. But there was Cole's voice, clear as anything, answering it anyway, from a ridge Cole physically could not have crossed in the time since they'd split. Harlan did the math himself, standing right there in the leaf litter. Distance. Minutes. It didn't work. He muttered the numbers out loud, like saying them again might make them add up different. They wouldn't. And there was something else he wouldn't be able to put into words until much later. The voice never once said his name back to him. It only ever answered like it had. Sound does strange things in a hollow this deep, he told himself. The same thing Obadiah would tell himself 2 years and 1 trailhead away, neither of them ever knowing the other had reached for the exact same lie. He kept walking toward the sound of his brother-in-law. That's when he laid eyes on him. Cole was standing wrong. Weight distributed like his boots weren't quite touching the leaf litter, like something had propped him up from underneath instead of him standing there on his own. He was already mid-sentence, answering something Harlan hadn't asked yet, his mouth lagging half a beat behind the words coming out of it. Harlan's brain flagged it as wrong 2 full seconds before his eyes could tell him why. 2 seconds he wouldn't get back for the rest of his life. He didn't run. He didn't even step back. He did the thing that would matter later, the thing he still can't fully explain. He kept talking to it. Asked about the tom he'd been working. Asked if it had seen anything move on the east side. Because the alternative was admitting what his eyes were telling him about a man he'd known for 11 years, and some part of him wasn't ready for that yet. Not at 7 in the morning, not over a turkey call. The wet leaf mold under his boots smelled the way it always did in May, green, damp, a little like gun oil where his hands had touched the stock. But underneath all of that, faint enough that he almost missed it, was something else. Rot. The specific, particular smell of fall leaves breaking down, the smell of October, in the middle of May green up, when everything in these woods should have smelled like growth, not decay. He didn't mention that part to Obadiah for a long time either. Cole, or the thing wearing the shape of him, mentioned the box call then, almost offhand, the way you'd bring up the weather. Asked if Harlan remembered the rasp on it, the one Cole's father had cut into the underside himself. C.W. filed into the wood so many years ago, neither of them could say exactly when. It was the one sound in these woods Harlan could pick out blind, even from 2 ridges away. He said so. Laughed about it even, the way you laugh when you're trying to convince yourself everything is fine. Cole, the real one, whichever one this was, smiled back the way Cole always smiled, and for 1 full second, the wrongness in his stance seemed to disappear entirely. Then it didn't. Then the day kept going, and Harlan kept walking beside him, and neither one of them said another word about it. The thing that had been 100 yards out was suddenly 20 yards behind him. There was no transition, no footsteps closing the gap, no rustle of brush marking its approach. 1 second it wasn't there. The next second it was. And Harlan would spend the rest of his life unable to explain how something that far away closed that kind of ground without ever once being caught in motion. The fog had thickened enough that the trail he'd walked for years now bent back on a bearing that made no sense on a mountain he could have hiked, blindfolded. "Everything okay out there?" Cole's voice called out. His exact cadence, the specific way he always let the last word trail up like a question even when it wasn't one. Half a second later, the exact same words echoed back from a completely different direction. Harlan froze. Whatever this was, it wasn't just mimicking anymore. It was testing the sound of itself against an audience, throwing its own borrowed voice out into the fog to see how it landed. Then, just as fast as it had shown up, it was gone. Real Cole stepped out of the brush a few moments later, and Harlan, spooked past the point of pretending otherwise, ran him through everything only the real Cole would know. Their dad's truck, the one that finally died on Route 20. The name of the dog they had growing up. What Reba said the night Cole proposed to her. Word for word. The story Cole had told 100 times at every family dinner since. Harlan asked faster than he meant to, voice tight, watching Cole's face for any hitch, any half-second lag like before. Cole answered every single one without missing a beat. No lag this time, no mouth trailing behind the words. That should have been the end of it. That should have been the moment Harlan's chest finally unclenched. Instead, his phone buzzed. One bar somehow, out here. A text from Reba, Cole's sister, Harlan's wife, who had no idea where either one of them was standing right now. Babies kicking like crazy, LOL. Tell my brother to hurry up and get home in one piece. The ordinary world had just reached one hand into these woods at exactly the wrong moment, and it felt like proof of something. Like a sign that everything really was fine. That a baby kicking in a Tuesday text message couldn't exist in the same world as whatever Harlan thought he'd seen an hour ago. Cole said he wanted to finish the calling window before the front rolled in. Said the Tom was close. Said it'd be a waste to head back now, with the bird practically strutting into range. Harlan, wanting badly to believe the ordinary world that text had just handed him, said, okay. He let him walk back to his post alone. It's the decision Harlan still can't talk about without his hands shaking, months later, in a hospital room 3 states from that mountain. Not because it was reckless, because at the time, it felt like the smart thing to do. The safe thing. The math had worked. Cole had passed every question, hadn't he? What kind of brother-in-law doesn't trust his own brother-in-law after that? The second Cole was out of sight. Harlan saw the mimic again. Farther off this time, but closing the distance too smooth to be running. Feet not quite touching the ground the way real feet touch ground. Gliding across leaf litter that should have crunched under any real weight at all. It didn't call out this time. It didn't need to. Harlan didn't move. He didn't call out a warning. He just stood there against a tree, cold sweat soaking through his shirt, the wet bark rough under his palm, and watched it float toward him through the fog. And that's when it hit him. The thing he wouldn't be able to shake for the rest of the hike, the thing that would follow him straight into that hospital bed. He had no idea which direction Cole had actually walked. The front hit like a switch flipped. 1 second, the fog was just fog. The next, rain came down in a wall, and visibility collapsed to arm's length. Harlan ran, screaming Cole's name into it, his boots skidding on wet leaves that had gone from dry to drowned in under a minute. "Cole!" The mimic answered in Cole's voice, from a direction Harlan couldn't place in the noise, the rain scattering the sound in every direction at once. He turned toward it anyway. He didn't have a choice. It was the only version of Cole's voice he had left to chase. He ran. Branches whipped his face. The rifle strap dug into his shoulder with every stride. A whisper landed directly against his ear. Not from ahead. Not from anywhere he was running toward. Right there, close enough to feel warm against his skin, using his daughter Nola's name. A name Harlan had never once said out loud on this mountain. Not to Cole, not to anyone. Not in 6 years of hunting trips where that name simply never came up. He would never be able to explain to the hospital psychiatrist, or to Obadiah, or to himself, how anything in these woods knew it. He spun, rifle up, finger already moving toward the trigger guard. Nothing there. Just rain and fog and the dark shape of trees bending under the wind. He stood frozen for a second, that stretched out longer than a second should. Rifle still raised. Rain running down the barrel, down his knuckles, into his eyes. Waiting. Because whatever this thing was, It had shown him twice now that it didn't rush. It let the fear build first. It let him stand there soaked and shaking, arms burning from holding the weight up, before it ever moved again. A second whisper landed, closer this time, close enough that he felt it move the wet hair against his neck. He turned and fired. The shot cracked through the rain like something physical, a pressure wave that seemed to push the whole storm sideways for half a second. Smoke and ozone hit the back of his throat. His ears rang out the rest of the world. And it was Cole, the real one. Reaching for his shoulder, mouth already open on some word Harlan would never hear, in the half-second before Harlan understood exactly what he'd just done. There was no time to feel that yet. No time to drop the rifle, no time to scream, because before Harlan could take a single step toward him, the mimic swooped in at a speed nothing on two legs should manage, low and fast through the rain, and Cole was simply gone. Not thrown, not dragged. Gone. The way the tom on that trail cam had folded backward into the brush instead of stepping out of it. Wrong, and instant, and impossible to make sense of no matter how many times Harlan would replay it in his head. Alone, for the rest of his life. He searched the mud where Cole had been standing. No drag mark, nothing pressed into the ground, nothing scraped through it, no boot prints skidding off toward the tree line. The rain had already erased whatever blood there should have been, if there'd been any left to erase. Copper sat on his tongue anyway. He'd bitten through his own cheek without noticing. His scream, when it finally came, sounded far away to him, like it belonged to someone else, someone standing a few feet outside his own body, watching this happen to a stranger. Wet nylon from his jacket pressed cold against his throat, where he'd clawed at the zipper. The rain kept coming. The gun smoke kept burning the back of his nose long after the rain should have washed it away. He called Cole's name until his voice gave out. He didn't know how long that took. He didn't know how long he stood there afterward, rifle hanging loose in one hand, staring at a patch of mud that had nothing left in it to tell him what had happened. The rain filling his footprints in behind him, one drop at a time. That's the last clear thing Harlan remembers. Everything after that, the walk, however long it was, however far, is gone. There's no memory of the 4 miles back to that trail. No memory of the fog lifting or the rain letting up. No memory of anything at all until the moment Obadiah found him sitting dead center on the path, filthy, repeating the same 4 words on a loop like a skipping needle. Is Cole with you? Is Cole with you? Is Cole with you? Obadiah closed out the county's version of events the way these things always got closed out. The medical examiner's report said the gunshot wound was real, but it wasn't what killed him. Whatever did that was dated to sometime after the shot and showed damage nothing local accounted for. No bear in this stretch of the Monongahela had claws that left marks like that. No bear left a body that clean of blood either. The case got filed under a euphemism: exposure, terrain, predator activity, take your pick. Nobody in that office was going to write down what the report couldn't explain. Obadiah drove home past midnight, catching the tail end of his daughter's birthday. The cake was already cut. He'd missed the candles by a couple hours. Nobody blamed him for it out loud, and that somehow made it worse. He checked the locks 3 times that night, every single one. Some part of him was half certain he'd answered a whisper on the hike out that he shouldn't have, and some other part of him didn't want to think too hard about which whisper that might have been. Weeks later, filing the paperwork, he pulled his own time-stamped extraction photos to attach to the report. It would be 6 more weeks before he thought to check whether his own memory card matched dispatch's file down to the second. Some part of him already knew what he was going to find before he found it. The order didn't match. Not corrupted files, just wrong, the same particular kind of wrong as a trail cam clip counting backward through a night that hadn't happened yet. He didn't put that detail in the report. He didn't tell anyone. He just sat with it, the way a person sits with something they can't take back once it's out loud. Harlan, still hospitalized weeks out, talked in his sleep one night. Said something about Cole, a detail only Cole could have known. Something about the truck, something the nurse on shift didn't fully understand but wrote down anyway. Word for word, because Harlan said it the way a person says something in answer to somebody else in the room. There was no one else in the room. Everything from that morning went into evidence, logged and bagged and shelved, except for one thing. The brass box call. The one with CW filed into the underside by Cole's father's own hand. So many years back, neither of them could say exactly when. It was never recovered. Not at the scene. Not anywhere along those 4 miles Harlan walked out on legs he doesn't remember using. Months later, Reba told Obadiah something on the phone, her voice careful, like she wasn't sure she wanted to say it out loud either. She'd started hearing a call from the tree line behind her house. A gobbler call, the kind with a rasp to it. A specific rasp, the kind you'd only recognize if you'd grown up hunting with the man who cut it. She hasn't told Harlan. Some things, she said, a person just carries alone. Obadiah didn't have an answer for that. He still doesn't, not really. Not the fog with no dew point. Not the timestamp that ran backward before anyone knew to be afraid of it. Not the 4 hours nobody who was there can fully account for. Some mornings, out on his own porch before his shift, he swears the woods behind his own house go quiet in that same particular way. He tells himself it's nothing. He doesn't go check.